Have you ever just stopped and asked yourself, why do I do the things I do? It's probably one of the biggest, most fundamental questions we can ask. Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain and explore the incredible, complex story behind our every single action.
No, I mean, really, take a second to think about it. Why are you watching this right now? Why do you have what you had for breakfast this morning? Why are you in the career you're in? It seems like it should be a simple question, right? But believe me, the answer is anything but.
You see, your behavior isn't just random chance. It's this rich, complicated story, and it has a bunch of different authors. It's written by the biology you were born with, by every single thing you've learned and thought, and by the world and the people all around you. So in this explainer, we're going to read that story, chapter by chapter.
So here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the big question of why we act at all. Then we'll dig into our body's blueprint, how our minds learn and adapt, what our inner drives are, and the incredible power of other people before we pull it all together at the end.
First up, why we act. You know, to really solve this puzzle, we have to act like detectives, piecing together clues from all over the place to see the big picture.
All right, Section 2, the body's blueprint. Let's start at the very foundation, the physical hardware that everything else, and I mean everything, is built on.
So just think of your central nervous system, that's your brain and your spinal cord, as the command center for your entire body. It's processing a flood of information and sending out orders every millisecond. And this whole system runs on brain chemistry, using these tiny chemical messengers to pass signals back and forth. It all starts with the genetic blueprint, handed down from your ancestors, which then gets shaped and molded by your life experiences.
Okay, so those little chemical messengers, they're called neurotransmitters, and they are absolutely essential. These are the molecules that literally make you feel happy or anxious or super motivated or just plain tired. They are the engine of our feelings and actions on a microscopic level.
And what's so wild is just how specific their jobs are. Take dopamine, for instance. That's the go-get-it chemical. It's what drives you to seek rewards, it fuels your motivation, and it's also at the heart of addiction. Serotonin, on the other hand, is kind of like a traffic cop for your brain. It helps regulate your mood, aggression, and even your sleep. When these tiny molecules are out of balance, that's when we see conditions like depression and anxiety pop.
Now, if you take away one thing from this section, let it be this. Your genes are not your destiny. Not even close. There's this amazing field called epigenetics that shows us how your experiences, things like stress or your diet, or even growing up in a loving home, can literally flip switches on your DNA. They can change how your genes work. Your life story leaves a real physical mark on your biology.
Section 3, mind and learning. Okay, so if biology is the hardware, then our experiences, that's the software. This is how you get uniquely programmed.
One of the most powerful learning processes out there is something called operant conditioning, which was famously studied by B.F. Skinner. The idea behind it is actually pretty simple, but it's also incredibly profound. Your behavior is shaped by what happens right after you do it. If something good happens, you'll probably do it again. If something bad happens, well, you'll probably stop.
So the cycle basically works like this. First, you do something. Anything. Second, that action has a consequence. And third, that consequence determines whether you're more likely or less likely to do that same thing again. It's this constant feedback loop that pretty much shapes all of our habits.
And once you see it, you start to see it everywhere, every single day. Every like you get on a social media post, that's a tiny reward, reinforcing you to post more. Studying hard is reinforced by getting a good grade. And a speeding ticket? Well, that's a punishment designed to make you stop driving so fast. This is the engine that drives how we form habits.
So you might be thinking, wait, how is this different from Pavlov and his famous dogs? Well, that's classical conditioning, and it's all about involuntary reflexes, like automatically feeling scared of dogs after you've been bitten. Operant conditioning, what we're talking about, is about voluntary choices. It's deciding to work harder because you got a bonus. One is an automatic reaction, the other is a conscious choice.
But here's the thing, we don't just learn from things that happen directly to us, we also learn by watching other people. Albert Bandura's famous Bobo doll experiments showed this in a huge way. Kids who watched an adult be aggressive toward a doll were way more likely to copy that exact same aggression. It's powerful proof that our behavior is deeply, deeply shaped by the role models we see around us.
Section 4, our inner drives. Okay, so we've got the hardware and the software, but what about the electricity? What's the engine that actually makes us go? Well, that comes from our inner drives, our motivations, and our emotions.
Abraham Maslow gave us this brilliant map for understanding this, called the hierarchy of needs. He basically argued that our motivations are built up in layers, like a pyramid. First, we're driven to meet our most basic survival needs: food, water, shelter. Once that's covered, we start looking for safety and security. Then, belonging and love. After that, we need to feel a sense of accomplishment. And finally, at the very top is the desire to reach our absolute full potential, what he called self-actualization. Any unmet need on this pyramid creates the drive for us to act.
We can also break our drives down into two main types. Are you motivated intrinsically, meaning you do something just for the pure joy and satisfaction of doing it? Or are you motivated extrinsically, doing it for some kind of external payoff, like money, a good grade, or even just praise from others? Figuring out which of these is fueling your actions is a huge step in understanding yourself.
Okay, next up, Section 5, the power of others. Now it's time to zoom out, because nobody, and I mean nobody, acts in a vacuum. We are social creatures through and through, and we're constantly being shaped by groups, by our culture, and by the enormous power of authority.
Take a look at this number, 65%. What on earth could that represent? Well, it comes from one of the most famous and, frankly, most disturbing experiments in the history of psychology, and it tells us something really profound and a little scary about human nature.
That is the percentage of perfectly ordinary people in Stanley Milgram's experiment who were willing to administer what they thought were excruciating, even dangerous electric shocks to another human being just because a guy in a lab coat told him to keep going. It is a chilling, unforgettable demonstration of how easily our own moral compass can be overwritten by the power of authority.
And that brings us to our final section, putting it all together. We've looked at the biological blueprint, the software of experience, the engine of motivation, and the influence of the crowd. Now, it's time to weave all those threads together.
The framework that lets us do this is called the biopsychosocial model. And what it tells us is that any given behavior is never, ever the result of just one thing. It's always a dynamic dance between your biology, your genes and your brain chemistry, your psychology, your thoughts, your learned habits, your motivations, and your social world, your culture, your family, and the pressures from your peers. You need all three pieces to see the whole story.
And really, in the end, that's the whole key right there. Our behavior isn't a simple equation. It's a rich, intricate tapestry. Every single thread, your neurotransmitters, your childhood memories, the culture you grew up in, is woven together to create the completely unique pattern that is you. So the next time you find yourself asking, why on earth did I do that? Remember the tapestry, and then ask yourself, what threads am I only just now starting to see?